What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the PokerNews podcast. It is pretty much the day of the year that we all wait for all year round. We are down to a final table. It's a day off for the WSOP main event final tablists. Jeff Platt, I'm Sarah Herring. Welcome to the show. Jeff.
Welcome. Good to be here. Now, usually this day is full of, when they do have a day off, I know they haven't a couple times in the last couple years, but isn't this day reserved for interviews with the likes of the Sarah Herrings of the world? That's what we talked about on the last podcast.
Yeah.
Right? The Final Nine does their interviews to help promote the final table, but this year?
No.
Nothing?
We don't need any promotion, okay? We've already decided poker is thriving. Nobody needs, but the true hardcore fans, also known as Jeff Platt and Sarah Herring, we're here no matter what.
That's true.
You tell us there's no media day, we say we're
still
coming
here.
anyways. We got PokerNews podcast family. I will say it does make me a little bit sad because I think it's one way for, the media, the fans, for everyone to get to know these players a little bit, to get a sense of their personality. Are they shy?
Yeah.
Is their dad back at home sick? Is their wife pregnant? Or I don't know. I just think it's an opportunity to get to know both their personalities and their stories. And then I think this gives you a lot more to bring with you when you watch the final table. You know what I mean? It's like you find the people that you want to root for, and that makes sense.
That's exactly right, because this Final Nine is a perfect example. A list of fairly unfamiliar names, to say the least, I would say. So as a fan, I was going to quote-unquote grind all of the interviews, watch all 9 interviews and just kind of develop, who I want to root for. I don't know any of these guys personally. I know a lot of people in the poker media community know Garry really well. They speak highly of him. And I just want to see a bunch of interviews today going into the final table. But I understand that you have to give your players a break of sorts, and I'm sure they have to come in today to do interviews for ESPN, for the production crew. I would just like to say maybe, you guys made the final table of the World Series of Poker main event. We need you to spend another hour.
It literally usually lasts max 2 hours, and that's including ESPN and PokerGo and everyone.
Or group them all together, put them in a scrum, and so one guy stops by and it's 10 minutes long for each guy.
Yeah.
And that's it. Just so we can get
just a little
more information, just a taste.
And Jeff, as you know, I always decide who I'm going to root for based on the person that doesn't show up for the media day, because they're at the Spearmint Rhino. Pretty much every year without fail, starting with Yogan O'Day, I want to say maybe 2012, 2013. Yeah. Every year from Yogan O'Day forward, there was one player that didn't show up because he was drunk at the strip club. And that's always the guy I root for. So now I don't even really know where to start. Where do I go?
Who would be that guy, you think, out of this 9?
That's such a good question, actually. That's such a good question.
I just have no idea.
It's definitely not pretty much any of them. I would guess maybe you'd have to go Hossein Ensan. He seems like he might be able to hit it hard.
He
definitely, when he
chips,
wins, he's let's get it, girl.
Let's get it. Yeah, I could see that.
But there's definitely none of those young 20-somethings that are, there are young 20-somethings, but they definitely don't seem they seem like the type that maybe want to have a Magic the Gathering night or something. That's terrible. But I did read, for example, I thought it was really interesting this morning reading about Timothy Sue, that he plays the violin, the piano, and the oboe. This is basically speaking 3 different languages. These are totally different. You have a wind instrument, you've got your piano, which is one thing, you've got strings. It's these are different languages basically. And I think he made the comment that both, he's a software engineer, right? And that both software and music and poker have some things in common, and that you have to sort of find your own lines and find your own ways to make things work for you. And I thought that was a really interesting take that maybe we don't get that often.
Man, I'll tell you what, Timothy Sue has really impressed me so far, at least from what I've been able to see on the broadcast coverage. He's had some swings. He was a massive chip leader at one point. He enters the final table as one of the shorter stacks, so it's been some kind of roller coaster ride for the last 2 days, and I feel like he's acted the exact same way throughout. He's always got kind of a smile on his face. You can tell he really enjoys this tournament, and I think that he carries himself really, really well. And this is his first ever main event. He has like $2,400 in lifetime cashes. He's playing for life-changing money, and I just think, again, that he represents the game in himself very well.
He does, and I would say that he's actually played some very interesting and tricky poker for someone who has such little, experience in this type of a stage or in this type of a spot.
Yeah.
But while we're talking about Sue, I think that we obviously need to at least address and talk a little bit about this gigantic 118 million chip pot against Hossein Ensan. I don't know. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. So if the hand action breaks down, we're looking at ace queen versus what tens is it? Should I pull up the actual hand?
I think we had ace 5 versus 10 deuce. So the one against Marchington?
No.
Oh, okay.
No,
Which one?
Hossein Ensan. This was a 118 million chip pot.
Right. I thought the
Sue
one where
lost.
Marchington bluffed it. Oh, that Sue lost to Ensan?
Yeah.
We didn't really do any prep for this one. We were just like, we'll read about the final 9 and we'll come in. But
It's
we
okay.
watched
I
it
did
all.
watch this hand, and I did talk about it a little bit with several other players. So I want to say, and I might get the action like slightly wrong, but basically Sue raises pre, Ensan, I want to say, calls. Gosh, you guys, now we have to get it. It's okay. I'm going to get it for you. But it was a really interesting spot where I felt like it was he tossed himself into a call.
Yes, when it came queen 10-7, right? So it was...
And then the board pairs.
Yeah. The board pairs on the turn, and Ensan check raises the river. Didn't Sue bet 16 million?
Yes, and then he bet like
45.
45, yeah.
And Sue tanked for a while, and in the end just could not find the fold on the, I think, queen 10-7, 10 blank? Or did he have 10s?
Two
and the board
sevens,
paired
queen
wood?
10, 7, 7.
And Ensan had 10s.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Queen 10-7, 7 blank. And Sue just could not find the fold. He tanked for
a while.
Pretty long. That was his longest tank of the tournament, I feel like.
And it seems like he was really talking. I thought he was just about to talk himself out of it. He looks like he's about to muck, and then at the last second just goes like, and like sticks it in, and you're like, whoa, what happened? But I thought this was really interesting because I think it's especially interesting to watch all these players who I think are super unfamiliar with each other and each other's styles. So I think so far, Ensan has, from all that I've ever seen of him, including the EPT Prague, which I also was there for, he has a very, very solid style. But it did make me wonder, I mean, with so much on the board, right? Like, this board is super juicy in that it's both paired, the flush draw gets there, the straight gets there. Like, everything is there. Everything is possible. There's so many possibilities for a much better hand than top pair, top kicker. But I have to wonder if Sue thought he had something, and this is something I wanted to ask you about, Jeff. I wonder sometimes, especially you watching all these final tables, how much does it affect people's decisions knowing that everybody is watching them? It has to. Yeah. I mean, I have like an ego thing already. I'm always just like, I just don't want to like let this go. And I wonder sometimes, like, he had just come off of making a pretty sick bluff against one of his other opponents. I want to say he had like 7-8, the other guy had like ace-5, but basically it runs out, nothing happens the whole time, and he ends up sort of like bluffing him off, which I think gives you that sense of like, I'm like in my game, I'm like a better poker player, and then to snap it off in a spot where I have to think he thinks that Hossein is bluffing here, because that's the only thing that he like really beats that's like possible on there, right? It's
like you have to turn such a good hand into a bluff catcher, really, because he's not doing that with king queen. He's just going to snap call your bet and hope that his king queen is good.
Right.
It's a really tricky spot, especially because, and I know, to your point, Ensan had been pretty solid throughout the tournament, and most of the time we saw him on TV pretty solid. He usually had it. But there was one moment in 45 minutes or an hour before where Ensan did bluff it off on the river, did not get called. And I can't help but think that Sue had somebody tell him, hey, watch out for this guy making big river bluffs. And so that might have been the one factor that was in his mind. Like you said, so close to fold. I don't know. He's trying to push people around on the river.
And he knows he's going to see it in 45 minutes. And just like eat it if he doesn't have it. And I do think it really does start to affect play. And it made me wonder too. So for example, one of the players in our chat just said, like on my day off, like all I'd be doing is sleeping, which I will argue that I've talked to a lot of players, in the last 10 years. It's very difficult for most of them to just keep sleeping for days and days. They've been waking up early. They've started their tournament at noon every day for 7-10 days, depending on what their day one was. Most of these players are not just going to be able to sleep in all day, no matter how drained they really are.
Yeah.
So then the question becomes, do you go watch the EPT Prague that Ensan wins? Do you go watch all the tape footage from the last few days that you can find? Or do you just continue to play the game that you know so far and hope that... Because I do think a lot of times getting this information changes your normal game, right?
Yeah, it can be like you can almost level yourself, because what if when there are 6 players left, you're playing a big pot against Timothy Sue, for example, and you've been watching Sue and you're like, oh, he's kind of crazy, he does this, X, Y, and Z, and I wouldn't normally call here, but then I call, and then you lose, and then you're just thrown kind of all out of sorts. Now, with that said, studying has to be a pretty valuable tool. I'm just not sure if the sample size is big enough on a lot of these guys. It'd be different if like I don't know, the Igor Kurganov, for example, was in this, and you had so much footage to look back on.
Right.
I don't know if you could get that done in a day, but just somebody
you could only do that with basically Dario Sammartino in this
right, exactly. And so Dario maybe is worth studying a decent amount. For the other guys, I just don't know if you can glean enough information off them in specific spots, because the sample size for those specific spots is going to be so small.
Yeah, no, I can definitely see your point for that. And I think it was interesting, actually. I talked to Dario yesterday, and I asked him about the being all up in Sam Greenwood's business earlier on in the tournament, because it's not something I was watching for him to have that same type of body language or do that same type of thing with someone else, which he clearly didn't. So I said, is this something that you feel comfortable being more playful with Sam because you guys know each other, because you've played together? And he said, I always have to be a man with 2 faces. So I need to see everything. I have to come into your space and see any possible tell. And he said, I can find tells all the time from all kinds of people, but somebody like Sam Greenwood, I have to make him feel scared or nervous or uncomfortable to elicit the kind of information that I think I can get from other players just regularly, right? So I thought that was super interesting. But do we want to talk a little bit about Dario then? Let's talk about this sad spot.
I think that kind of leads perfectly into this hand, which was certainly the most controversial hand yesterday. So Dario picks up pocket tens. He opens to 1.7 million, folds around to Nick Marchington. Marchington shoves for 22.2 million. Dario asks for a count. He says something like, I think I'm going to have to call. Can I get a count, please? Something to that effect.
Like, he's not excited about it, but...
Right. He's not thrilled, but he has pocket
knows the
tens.
numbers.
They're relatively strong. He wants to get a count. The blinds are 400,000 and 800,000, so it's a standard open, and the shove was for close to 30 big blinds. So the dealer counts it out, and she says that the count is 17.2 million, not 22.2 million. So pretty close to 20 big blinds. Dario puts the chips in relatively quickly, and then it's like, wait a minute, she realizes she was wrong on the count, and the count was actually 22.2 million. But Dario has already stuck his chips in the middle. So they bring over a floor. The floor rules that that's a call. Nobody really says that much, and then they flip their cards. Dario flips his tens. Nick Marchington has a couple of queens. So Dario sees that he's way behind. He sees that he's known that there was a counting error, and I don't want to say he throws a fit, because that'd be overstating it a little bit, but he certainly jumps up and he argues with the floor.
Yeah.
So the floor at the time, Brian, I think it was, brings in Charlie, a quote-unquote higher floor. Charlie agrees with the ruling that it's a call. Now, the World Series of Poker rules very specifically state that it is on the player in this situation, even if a dealer misidentifies the chip count. So she could have said 10 million or 100 million. Once Dario sticks in those chips, it is a call. So Brian calls over Charlie. Charlie comes in. He says, that's a call. I agree. They call for a higher floor. That's Dennis. Dennis is, I think, number 2, right, on the list? Dennis comes in. He rules that that's a call. And Dennis says, Dario's still upset. So Dennis says, I'd be more than happy to get Jack Effel, the big boss man, here. So here comes Vice President of the World Series of Poker, Jack Effel. Takes a couple minutes for him to get to that table. Clearly somebody on the production crew handed him a microphone so he could pick up the sound a little bit more, which I love in these controversial, dramatic moments. Thank you very much. And Jack agrees with his floor guys. He says the rules specifically state that it's on the player, blah, blah, blah. It's a call. Dario says it's unfair.
How's the rest of the table, by the way, like this whole time kind of reacting to the situation?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think for the most part, everybody was pretty quiet. Dario did ask somebody next to him, I think it was maybe Alex Livingston, like what he thought, and we couldn't really hear what Livingston's answer was. Livingston did speak up in a minute, which we'll get to. So Jack says it's a call. Dario says that's unfair. Jack says it's a call. You're not going to talk your way out of this one. Dario's like, okay. And then Jack says, if you were calling 17, you were calling 22, and then instantly leaves. And so, it's kind of a needle at the end from Jack, whereas Dario's main point throughout his argument with the floor was, I have to call if it's close to 20 big blinds, which 17 mil at 400, 800K is. But I can't call if it's close to 30 big blinds, which the accurate count, 22.2 million, is close to 24 million. And Jack comes in and is just like, if you're calling 17, you're calling 22. Peace out. And then just bounces.
Dude,
and so Dario's like...
And we know Dario knows, like, GTO exactly what is, like, okay, this is when I have to call or not call.
Right. And so then Livingston spoke up. And Livingston was like, that was out of line. I think he posted something on Twitter as well that Jack owes Dario an apology, which I agree for that one line. Now, I also agree that they made the correct ruling because it is very specific in the rule book, and I think the broadcast team did a great job at referring to that. I think the floor did a great job as well. You feel terrible for the dealer in this spot, who is, by the way, regarded as one of the top dealers at the World Series of Poker and will continue to be regarded as such. It's just like a tough spot. She realized her mistake pretty quickly. It just wasn't fast enough. Could Dario have, quote-unquote, thrown more of a fit before the cards were revealed when they ruled it was a call? Probably. I don't know. It's a tricky spot. It's the main event. It's brutal. The 10s do not win, by the way. The queens from Marchington are able to hold up. But, Dario still goes into the final table with more than 30 big blinds and is still, I think you'd have to say he's the best player left at this final table.
For sure. And Dario's more than dangerous with 30 big blinds. And, I think it's a shitty situation, but obviously this type of thing has arisen tons of times, which is why there's already a rule about it. But I think this is interesting, actually, talking about coming in with 30 big blinds. One of the homies, Lucky, says that he, really enjoys the short stack poker.
Yeah,
I thought it was interesting reading about Kevin Maahs, who bought in, like, basically at the very last possible second into the main event, which this was the first time ever. So this year you could buy in up to the start of the day 2, right? Start of the day?
Correct.
Which that's never been an option before. And I, for one, thought, nobody will probably take that or want that. But actually, of the final 35... 3 of the players who were left in the final 35 did choose to exercise this option. And in reading about Kevin Maahs, he said, I prefer the short stack style of poker. That's what I like to play. And I thought that was really interesting because you always are hearing, everybody wants to. You get the big stack, it's the fun. You get to bully people around,
especially in the main.
Yeah, but I can remember several years ago talking to Dominic Nietzsche, who was considered a short stack expert at that point, and saying when you know exactly how to play every single moment of your stack in almost all these spots, and that's your edge, then okay. Lose let the chips go till they get to where you want them to be or whatever.
It uncomplicates the thought process. He's going to go into the final table, I think, with 43 big blinds, which is kind of sort of where he's been sitting around throughout the entire tournament. He had a really good first day for him, which was day 2A, but you looked since then, at the end of day 3, he bagged 123K. At the end of day 4, 2.5, end of day 5, 7.5, end of day 6, 19.5. He's just been on a steady climb, but has never been one of the top chip leaders in this tournament. He gets the chips in relatively good. He got in on a flip, ace-king versus Mike Nowinski's queens, and spiked on the river, and then he got it in with aces against ace-queen and was able to hold up. I mean, he's clearly very comfortable. He's a quiet guy. He sticks to himself. When he spiked that ace on the river, he's just kind of like, That's how the short stack poker go. Got to win flips. So it's cool. I like him. He's very calm. He's very calculated in his approach.
How interesting, too, to see Nowinski again.
Nowinski,
it took me
what
a
a run,
second.
man. Good game.
It took me a second. Yesterday, I was looking at all the pictures and stuff, and I was like, I know
Wait a
this
minute.
kid. I know this dinosaur shirt. I know this guy. And so I went to his Hendon mob, and it's crazy because really on Nowinski's Hendon mob, there's like 4 results, and one of them is like 15th place. And yeah, exactly. Like it's crazy, and it was great to see him again. And it's so I just always have to wonder, like, what are you doing the rest of the year? If you're he's clearly a great poker player. You can watch him making decisions and putting people on hands and ranges, and I'm just Nowinski, what are you doing the rest of the time?
And he cashed last year in the main. Like, it was a min cash, but still, like, this is kind of this guy's tournament. Finished 15th in 2016, 12th this year, and was a lot of fun to watch. You mentioned the T-shirt. I think he was a very good personality. Mm-hmm. He's another guy kind of like Sue, who was great when he had chips and also great when he didn't have chips. I mean, he was just a guy who was enjoying the moment. Oh, hey, Lizzie Harrison. Oh, and Buster's here.
Oh my gosh, you guys,
awesome.
This is what happens when you're live. Anything can happen. No, come on, bring it over
come on,
here.
Bus.
Hi, Bro. Hello, you want to be on our show?
You guys, this is the best thing. This is what I need in my life. This is what I've needed all my life. You're such a handsome boy. You remind me of my prince. Why are you so brindle and pretty?
Oh,
this is what happens when you're live, guys. But
There's
seriously,
Lizzie
that's what
Harrison.
I needed. That's like just the little taste
that was
that I needed.
the pick-me-up that Sarah needed.
Yeah,
Thank you, Lizzie.
that was the joy that I've been needing in my life.
Oh, Buster. One of the all-time greats.
Oh my gosh, how sweet. Okay, so let's talk about some of the other personalities coming in. I think we've, for me especially, I gotta talk Garry Gates, dude.
Yeah. This one's all you, because you and Garry
boy.
Gates go back a ways.
My boy, you guys. So when I very first started working at PokerNews, which was 10 years ago, maybe 9 years ago.
Way back in the day.
Yeah, many years ago. My girl, Lynn Gilmatin, who was and still is one of my best friends, was dating little-known gentleman named Garry Gates. I'm giving you guys the real inside scoop here, right?
It's the juicy drama.
Garry was, I think, sort of the managing editor of PokerNews, and he had just relinquished that position when I came into PokerNews. But he was still dating Lynn, so he was still sort of like part of the PokerNews podcast, or PokerNews family, rather. And since then, he has been scooped up by PokerStars, which was a really great move. I think he's just like such a get-it-done type person. He's definitely someone where when you go to events, players know if they need something handled. Gary's the guy to go to. He was in VIP services for a long time, dealing with, mostly the high rollers. He's been around the biggest and best names in poker for years. And actually, he's been a big part of the transition in trying to get online poker and specifically PokerStars and some of the people to get online poker back in the United States via these land-based casinos. So he's just been around poker for ages, but to see someone like this, to see Garry capture that sort of, being a WSOP main event final tableist is just surreal.
Yeah.
I always say that everyone's my friends, right? I'm like,
Sure.
oh, my friend, this happened. And they're my friend, but they're my poker friend. Gary's like an actual friend, like someone I've hung out with socially, and it's so wild. And it just seems, you just know so many sick poker players, right? Like the best poker players in the world who just everyone busts. And then you see somebody who's like, he loves poker, he talks poker. He's not a professional poker player. Not even a little bit. And look at him, and he was super spot on all day yesterday. I actually thought he was making like a lot of really smart moves, smart plays, smart laydowns. Like, I was like, that's my boy.
I think you could have very easily said that out of all the players yesterday, Garry Gates played the best. That doesn't mean he's coming in as the chip leader, although he is coming in second place, but I think he made the best decisions throughout the course of the day. And how about that rail? Huh? That like, no rail compared yesterday, which makes you think that no rail is going to compare throughout the course of the final table. Like, the amount of support within the poker community and maybe outside of it too that he has is simply incredible. You mentioned him dealing with players as part of his job with PokerStars. Keep going back to this tweet from Timex, Mike McDonald. He says, I'm not a big believer in karma, but my God, after so many years of putting up with every single high roller diva in poker, my God, Garry Gates deserved that ace on the river. That was when he got in with ace king against kings, and $10 million of poker player money that are going to follow. So just a really
that's so
cool
spot
story.
on.
And I know day 4, day 5, somebody from PokerNews talked to Garry, and he's like, no, I'm not quitting my job. You know, I love it. I wonder what he'll say after day 8, day 9, day 10. I don't know. We'll see.
It will be super interesting to see how the whole thing plays out. And, you know, not only does he quote unquote deserve it, but I think he needs it. You know, like, we don't make a lot of money, and I spoke to him at the very beginning of the main event, and he needs it. He could use it. I think a lot of us are in some debts and things, and it's time to just get out and make it happen. Well, but I spoke to him yesterday, and he was so calm. I think that's something that really surprised me. For example, if I was in this situation, I'd be losing my damn mind, which is why I'm not in this situation, I'm sure. But he was like, I'm just, you know, like, I'm just riding the moment. I just feel really, like, good and comfortable. And he had said that he was feeling like he was getting a little bit sick yesterday, and that actually several of the guys had, if they weren't sick yesterday, they had been sick prior.
Dario especially.
And I spoke to Dario. Actually, that was really interesting. When I spoke to Dario yesterday, he said, maybe I think it's better if you're sick, because you don't think, oh, I'm hungry. You don't think, oh, I have to go to the bathroom. Oh, I want to make this crazy play. You just are right in the moment. You know, you play right in the moment. And I was thinking, that's interesting, but, you know, I think I would argue, and I'll ask you, Jeff, what you think, especially as much poker as you play. The way that things went with the schedule yesterday, there was a lot of breaks early on, a lot of early breaks, and they basically took the dinner break at 4:20, which then when you're playing until 3 o'clock in the morning, I was thinking, without like Adderall or like, how are these players even surviving? Just protein bars?
That's a great point that I didn't think about at all, because, you know, these breaks are 15 minutes. Some of them end up being 18, 19, 13, depending on TV purposes. But your extended break was gone, and you were playing 6 or 7 hours later. It's got to be tough. You know, it's got to be really, really tough. You already have to be absolutely exhausted late in day 7 on the main event. To combine that exhaustion with lack of, you know, fuel, so to speak, that has to be really, really tough to stay locked in, to stay focused, to stay in the moment.
To not make mistakes.
Yeah.
The craziest thing is just how often you're just in these like really high pressure moments and situations where there's so many factors that you have to consider and that have to go on, and then, you know, a tiny mistake could ultimately cost you, you know, life equity of like $9 million or more. And that's not even including the implied value of just the publicity and the, you know, the bonus of being part of the final table.
Right, and that's why we see probably, not the sole reason why, but part of the reason why we may see some chip leader blowups, and we have throughout the last, you know, however long the main event has been going on. And we started to see one yesterday with Nick Marchington, who came in with all the chips and got even more chips, where he was just absolutely running over the field. And then he carries out this crazy triple barrel bluff against Ensan on a really dry board, and loses so much of his stack like that. And then all of a sudden he's down to under 20 bigs. He rallied that double up against Dario Sammartino. Certainly helped him, and he was able to finish the day with 20 million, which is the short stack with his 20 bigs, so he is still alive. But man, he had 40 million going into day 7, and has 20 million going into the final table, was up to something like 65 or 70 million at one point. And, you know, that blow up could have been related to all sorts of factors, but maybe because he didn't have the energy, or, you know, he wasn't utilizing his breaks correctly. He's 21 years old, so clearly doesn't have that much live tournament poker experience. That's why, you know, the main event is so fascinating, because you just never have any idea of what's going to happen.
Yeah. Well, speaking of, you know, coming in as really, really big chip leaders, this is, in all my years of covering the main event final table, I have never seen a chip leader with this kind of... He has almost double the next chip stack, am I right?
Yeah, he has 177 million, Hossein Ensan does, going into the final table. Garry Gates has 99 million, and then we drop off to Zhen, who has about 60 million in chips. They're a decent amount of short stacks, which is going to really have an impact, I think, on especially this first day of final table play, considering these pay jumps. You go from 1 million to 1.25 million to more than 1.5 million. That's going to be the first day of coverage. Then you go to 1.8 to 2.2 to $3 million. I mean, these are some serious pay jumps. And when you're a short stack and looking around at other short stacks, you know, it could definitely weigh in on how you choose to play. And it gives the opportunity for Ensan and Gates to just try to run everybody over. So I'm real curious to see how this final table plays out if they do go with that kind of strategy. Like, I thought yesterday Ensan could have almost like been raising blind every hand just to put an immense amount of pressure on everybody because he just has so many chips.
It's crazy. And I've seen, you know, big chip leaders before. I remember like Yori Van Hoff had like quite a lot of, I mean, we've definitely, there've been lots of years where someone went in as a very dominating chip leader, but this is like next level dominating. Yeah. But it is interesting because I would say, although Hossein was playing very solid, I wouldn't say that he was overly active. No.
I agree with you. And like I talked about that one bluff he made earlier, and that was like the one bluff that we saw him make. I think he was making a lot of hands, but wasn't involved in a lot of hands, like you're saying. So maybe he'll turn that around. It'd be a great time for him to do so because players who have been told about previous play from their friends, or maybe they went back and watched the coverage, they're like, you know what, for a chip leader, he wasn't really that active, and maybe that really opens the door for him to ramp it up.
Come in and totally mix it up.
Yeah, for sure.
That's something I was going to ask you is what you think in terms of it's interesting because I think you talk about what it used to mean to be like part of the November 9, right? You had like 4 months, 3 months of study. You had 3 months of potentially traveling circuits, like going around, getting more live tournament experience and exposure to also studying your opponent's games and all before. And it's one of the reasons I think why people have said this is a much more pure, like the integrity of the game is much more pure in this spot, but I still wonder how many people's games are going to look exactly the same or what's going to change once you finally get to that 9.
Because when you have months and months before November 9, you can hire a coach. You can really ramp up your studying. When you have one day, you don't want to overwhelm yourself, right? Especially when you have these media obligations, not that many compared to previous years, but when you have to come into the Rio for at least a little bit to do some interviews for ESPN, I don't think you want to just go nuts because you don't want your mind to be super clouded and confused, right? Going into this final table.
For sure. And we've actually seen players make mistakes in blowups based on information that they had, received from their rails or whatever, who later, in interviews said, oh, I saw him make a fold here in this spot, so I made this bluff on the river thinking that he was capable of folding here when, maybe their natural instinct wasn't that. And I think it will be interesting, and it was even yesterday, for example, seeing the rails. Dario Sammartino's rail was all over it. Dario was coming to his rail
constantly.
And finding out what everyone had. And I think this is something he's very well practiced at, right? Receiving this information and working it into his game is something he's been doing for 10 years now. Where some of the other players, I think maybe it's their intuition or it's their normal style that's gotten them to where they are, and it may make sense for them to maybe not have as much information or pump the brakes. Although I do have to say, oh my gosh, I love the coverage, of course. I just love watching it. And so yesterday I was trying to watch all the streams, but my internet was terrible and it kept I kept not being able to finish the hands, which just makes you crazy when you're in the middle of a hand and then it's buffering and then you come back and it's on something else. And so I was, watching, and sorry, PokerNews, but then I just, eventually relented and went to the live blog, which is not on a delay, so you can always go back and catch anything you miss. But I was thinking, when you are seeing the hands and not knowing what people have, it's so much less interesting.
Oh, that's
I was
so
just
true.
reading the live blog and I was just oh, it's so much more cool to watch the moments and see what's happening when you know what both players have, right?
That's the great thing about the main event is, every year we come in at day 5 or day 6 with a ton of what we think are storylines, and those storylines run out, and we're like, we're screwed now. These guys aren't that recognizable. But then you actually watch the coverage. You watch them play down to the final table of the main event, and it's just super compelling and super fascinating. It's in my opinion, the most entertaining broadcast of the year.
Oh, no question.
Just because of the stakes.
And it's been so good. It was so good.
It's so good. And then you have the controversy with Dario's hand. You have the drama. You have all the floor people called in. I just think you never know what to expect in the main event, like I said earlier. And that's just part of what makes it so great. The other part is this is the greatest poker tournament in the world. And every year it's the time for poker to shine. And it's pretty cool that, poker was on ESPN2 until like 2 or 2:30 in the morning, till past 5 a.m. on the East Coast. It's just fascinating to me.
I mean, this is what we all wait for, right?
Yeah,
this is the whole thing. Yeah. And finding these players, finding these stories that you would never normally find. I mean, that's what I love so much about the main, is that these are players that 3 months from now, 6 months from now, next year will be saying, oh, WSOP main event final table list, because you really do come to know and root for and love these guys. And yeah, I can't wait to see it all play out.
Same
I really
here.
can't. I really can't. And I wanted to ask you something before I let you go.
Well, I love the way that they do it while you try to think of that they don't try to cram the final table into one marathon episode, because I do think that would have a tendency to drag. But when you play from 9 to 6 one night and then boom, you're done. You come back the next night and play from 6 to 3. Boom, you're done. And then maybe the next night could be a marathon. We've seen it. We saw it last year. When you play down from 3 to your champion, I think that keeps the interest at such a high level that I really think they found the right balance with having a live World Series of Poker main event broadcast. And I think it's just a situation in which everybody wins.
Well, so for those who are watching and who want to be watching the action live, I want to say I think it starts, tomorrow, 7 p.m. Pacific on ESPN2. But they said cards are in the air at 6:30, which is like only a 30-minute delay.
Yeah,
I guess.
For the main, they do very little. Like, they do last second, let's get on, let's have that 30-minute and 0 seconds delay. I do believe that tomorrow, since it is Sunday night, it is, like you said, on ESPN2, and then they'll switch to ESPN Monday and Tuesday night as we play down to a champion. And that shows you how much ESPN respects poker, because ESPN will let this broadcast go on and on and on Tuesday night. When they have SportsCenter, when they have pretty compelling programs coming up afterwards, where they could very easily say, let's just brush it off to ESPN2 or move it to ESPN Plus. But every year on this one night, ESPN will say, let it go, as long as it takes.
And
it's the
I
main.
think that it's sick, because even so many people that I know, for example, people that I've only met in Houston in the last few years, people are texting me like, I want to play poker.
Right,
I'm watching
right.
poker.
You get all that.
This is, people that I think are less familiar, aren't, they think they know a little bit about poker or whatever. Like, this is the night they wait for too. This is when we get all them. Come to the Thunderdome and let's just bang it out. Well, I don't remember what I was going to ask you, but don't worry, we have more days.
Many more podcasts.
Yeah, so we'll come to you guys again Monday, right?
Yeah, Monday, when we'll be down to 6 players left in the main.
Which everyone knows is my favorite kind of poker anyway.
6-handed?
Yeah, we want to...
6-max grinder
I like
over
that,
here.
That 6-max. Yeah. I like to watch that 6-max. That's where all the fun is. And, regardless of who ends up in the final 6, we're definitely going to thank you guys. Jeff. All right, you're the worst. But
come on, Mario. What?
We want to give a big shout out, of course, to our sponsors, Global Poker. And let me tell you exactly what you need to know about Global Poker, which is somewhere in a text message that I sent to someone. I know it's the fastest growing poker site in America. Global Poker is the home of online poker in America, thanks to their massive weekly tournament schedule and the chance to win through their jackpot sit-and-goes. With more than 1 million registered players in the United States, if you're not playing on Global Poker, you're missing out. Head to www.globalpoker.com and set up an account today. All right, guys, we will catch you on Monday. We'll probably jump in and do this at some point before play. Cards are in the air 6:30 Pacific, so I'm guessing we'll probably do our stuff maybe 4:30, something like that. But as always, we'll tweet out at you, at Jeff Platt, at Auntie Chardonnay, at PokerNews. And if you got any interesting tidbits or juicy gossip, be sure to hit us up in the DMs. Deuces.